Let's start the show. And of course, we're going back in time as promised last week on Something to Wrestle to King of the Ring 2001. And this was the 20-year anniversary of one of the most talked about pay-per-views in WWF history. And I'm going to set the stage for you, Bruce. Is that okay?
Sure.
You guys purchased WCW at this point and are in the process of trying to get the company up and running. You've lost The Rock to the movies. You've lost Steve Austin as far as he's not the babyface anymore. He's now a heel. And so you're light on baby faces. And let's talk about Judgment Day building up to this. It features Steve Austin defeating The Undertaker to retain the WWF World title. Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit win a tag team turmoil match to become the #1 contenders for the WWF World Tag Team titles. And Kane wins the Intercontinental title from Triple H, and Chyna would retain the women's title over Lita. So there's a lot going on, and that's where we're going to start, Bruce. And I want to talk a little bit about Chyna here. It is Chyna's last match ever in the WWF. What happened coming out of that pay-per-view that just blew up the relationship with Chyna?
Well, okay, first of all, let's go back. I mean, I didn't personally purchase WCW. The corporation, WWE, actually purchased WCW, and the Rock has never been lost. I mean, if he was, then he's obviously been found. But you know, it's an interesting time in the business because it's some uncharted waters in that we, at this period, have no competition. Well, not that we had competition with WCW at that time. They had long fallen off kind of the competition route, but even so, there was really nothing else out there at that time, and we had retained what we chose to retain of talent.
You gotta get excited about saving people all those dollars. They can limousine ride and jet fly now with that extra cash.
And they can style and profile with a quick 10-minute phone call right now to 425-0105.
That's 425-0105. Woo!
SaveWithConrad.com.
From WCW that didn't want to sit out, didn't want to take their contracts, and for those that did, good for them. I probably would have done the same thing in the same situation with the amount of money that they were guaranteed to sit at home. There were a few, like Booker T, DDP, that actually, wanted to work, and they wanted to continue honing their craft and doing what they did. So it's an interesting time, and I think there were a lot of eyeballs on us from that aspect of, okay, what you going to do now? And while the armchair quarterbacks that would sit back and go, oh man, you totally screwed up because you didn't have Hogan, you didn't have Hall and Nash and Sting and Goldberg and all that. Those guys were being paid to stay home. Those guys were being paid lucrative contracts that were guaranteed by AOL, Time Warner, and they had no desire to come over. They weren't part of the deal. That's not what we purchased. We purchased the assets of WCW, and that included their tape library, some rings, and a few other things, but not a whole lot, because there wasn't a whole lot to purchase, and that's where we were. And at this time, with Chyna's last match, I just think that it was a decision by Chyna at that point where she felt that she didn't want to be in the same place where her ex was, and she had the choice. She was made an offer to remain with the company, and she made a choice. She made a choice to go somewhere else and do something on her own. And her decision to do that was her own. But I don't know, other than not wanting to work in the company where her ex was at the time. I think that probably influenced her decision, but only she knows that, and she's not with us anymore. But that's where we were on the Chyna bit.
Yeah, for those of you that maybe didn't get to see it, recently Vice did a documentary on Chyna. I highly recommend going out of your way to check that out. So I was questioning here, WCW ever going to get over when its leader here, it's Shane O'Mac. He's talking shit to Kurt Angle, gets his ass beat, starts tapping out to the ankle lock, making Kurt the babyface and Shane the heel. Isn't that ass backwards?
Compared to who? Who says you think that's ass backward?
I'm just asking because I know a lot of...
You said it.
Shane's obviously in control here. You want to push WCW. They're ready to come on board. You have the buzz around that, and then all of a sudden kick the shit out of him on live TV.
So you want him to kick the shit out of the Olympic gold medalist, who is the top guy representing the other side?
Not necessarily kick the shit, but not.
Then you'd be saying, but no, hang on. Then you'd be saying the same thing. Oh, this doesn't make any sense. Shane, the new up and coming, and is taking the guy that is up front and center and the stalwart in the company. Look, again, it's you have heels and you have baby faces. You have protagonists and you have antagonists. And in this particular situation, in this storyline, Shane was the antagonist. What do antagonists do? What do people want to see? They want to see the antagonist get their ass kicked. That's what we did.
All right. Well, let's hear from one of your Jericho. We're on to him. He needs help to pin Kurt Angle after Shane O'Mac interferes. Why do you think Jericho isn't booked in a similar fashion as Benoit in the run-up?
Because they're different people with different styles. One has a personality, the other one doesn't.
Fair enough. That makes sense. There's talk with various WCW wrestlers happening at this time. You mentioned it at the top of the show. The whole invasion, the buyout, all that stuff's going on. You guys actually have covered it. It's in the archives, you and Conrad. But to your knowledge, what were the contract negotiations like with people like Goldberg, Scott Steiner, or Rey Mysterio?
Goldberg and Steiner, there really weren't any because they had time left on their Time Warner deals that they wanted to play out. Ray was the same way, but I think that Ray's was probably one of the closest ones that was going to be coming up. And so we're actively talking to Ray, and JR was definitely, had his thumb on exactly where everybody's contracts, when they were coming up and when to start hitting them up. Trying to hit some guy up that's got a year and a half left on a payout of many dollars that we weren't about to match. Nonsensical. You call, you say hello, how you doing? Hey, when your contract comes up, you want to come back and work, give us a call.
No, it makes sense. Otherwise, other than staying relevant, but what's the point when you're getting paid that big of dollars? And they all had opportunities after the fact, so it worked out for everyone. Let's talk about the build here to Angle versus Shane. That's obviously the huge match we're going to talk about when we get into the card. Angle qualifies for the King of the Ring tournament, and Angle worked 3 matches at that pay-per-view that we're going to touch on here. You guys had the strongest talent roster right around this time, many would say. Why Angle working 3 matches at this pay-per-view?
Why not? Kurt was a stud, and it was a story. And it was a story talking about the different hoops that Kurt had to go through. So that was a big part of the story. And it was how many times, what obstacle are you going to throw in front of Kurt Angle before you can finally drop him?
So you were a fan of Spike Dudley and Molly Holly, got it. Meltzer wasn't, understood. The WWF is reportedly signing talent coming out of WCW and ECW, and you mentioned Booker T, Buff Bagwell, Rob Van Dam, and Tommy Dreamer. Are these all welcome additions to your roster at this point, Bruce?
Yes. Every one of them were welcome additions to the roster. And, ECW recently closed its doors as well.
Yes.
They had their run, and the people in South Philly were upset when they closed that door.
I'm just waiting for it.
Tommy, what?
I was just waiting for you to say something about the hundreds of people that enjoyed that product. Go ahead.
G19.
There it is.
N42. Yeah. So, but it was, Rob coming in was a welcome addition, as was, Dreamer. But look, Booker and Buff, there were high expectations for them. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, honestly, Booker T, a lot of steam behind him, and we'll talk about what he did with it as we get into the end of this episode.